and welcome back to another tutorial. My name is Infinity, and today we will be going over how to make things in a round, working in a round as they say. Also in this tutorial I decided to combine a little bit of a clip of gauge. Now I know I said I would do a separate tutorial, but I found that as we get into tutorials, less basic tutorials, that gauge is super important, so I wanted to touch on that a little bit today. So the main question is, what in the world is gauge? So gauge is basically what how big something is going to come out or how small it's going to come out to be. So for example, the recommended gauge for this Red Heart yarn, Super Saver Stripes, is 5.5 millimeter hook, or an I9. You should get 12 stitches, 12 single crochets rather, across 4 inches. So what does that mean? Well, if you have too many stitches per those 4 inches, then your project is going to be smaller than what you want it to be. And if you have too few, well, that means your project is going to be way bigger than what you need it to be. And sometimes that adjustment to gauge is necessary, but other times you should be particularly following the yarn instructions. Some of the things that come with not following gauge would be like your project is coming out to again, too big or too small, or you run out of yarn mid-project, and there's nothing worse than that, because sometimes yarn is made in dye lots, and if your dye lots don't match, then your project is going to look probably not horrible, but probably not what you had in mind. So for this tutorial, like I said, the recommended gauge for this yarn is 5.5 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is actually try to find a 5.5 millimeter in my magic hook jar. And that was the first hook I touched. Cool. So the 5.5 millimeter is often called the I9. And this is my friendly little H hook right here, which is a 5.0 millimeter, or just a 5 millimeter. Now, I wanted to hint at, if you joined in on the make along and you saw where my project was V'ing in, I have a hook that is very similar to my H here, and it is actually not a 5 millimeter. It is rather a size I, so I think it's like a 6 millimeter. And I think that by the time that I picked up another hook, I was working with the 5 instead of this one. And I noticed this during the recording of session 2 of the make along. So I just wanted to point that out. Gauge is important. So in events where you do that, you end up having to block, which can be trying. Blocking is another thing that kind of helps to compensate for little mistakes or errors in your making. So say if you make a sweater and it comes in too small about the waist, if the yarn has enough stretch, you can pin it down on your mats or any soft surface and dampen it just a little bit and let it dry like that, pin down, and it will take the shape of however it's been pinned down. So that's the beauty and wonder of blocking. But here's to not having to do that today. I'm going to put my hooks back in the jar off to the side, and we're going to get started. I'm not going to use this skein. Right now I'm going to show you all or rather my favorite way of working in the round. There's 2 ways to work in the round, but this is one of my favorites. So it's called a magic circle. And the magic circle is used for a lot of hat patterns, and it's, in my opinion, simpler to work. So what we're going to do with that is hold the yarn And take 2 or 3 fingers. If you're just starting off, I know I started off with 3 fingers, wrapping my yarn around 3 fingers, and holding your working yarn in your tail between your thumb and your pinky here, while you have this 2-part loop around your fingers. And what you're going to do is put your hook under that first loop and that second loop, and you're just going to twist your yarn, grabbing that working tail, slowly letting it go so that you have this loop. Now, I don't like letting go of my loop. I find that sometimes I'll mess it up if I let it go, especially depending on the patterns that I'm working. I just choose to not let it go for the time being. So what I'm going to do, or what I've already done rather, is chain 1, which secures it. And then I think I'm going to work this magic circle in double crochets. It's still October at this point, and so that is the stitch of the month that I'm going to be working with. So I'm chaining 3 altogether. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and for my patterns personally, I count the chains as a stitch. So I'm going to make 11 more double crochets in this loop. Now, most hat patterns will have you to do 12 double crochets in your magic circle. There are some that call for more, some that call for less. So just go according to your pattern. So now what I'm doing is yarning over and creating that double crochet, and just gonna keep doing that until I have my 12. And just to talk a little bit more about gauge, your tension. People, when they make these yarns, they know that everyone has a different tension. Everybody has a different tension. And so the gauge is meant to kind of help out with that. I know that sometimes, especially when I first started out, I had a way too tight tension. And then I look at other people that crochet. My grandmother got into crochet after I did, and she has a super loose tension. Everything she does is pillow soft, no matter the size of hook that she uses. And I'm just like, how do you do that? So the gauge on your yarn label is meant to kind of, again, compensate for that, so that your project turns out similar to the swatch or example that you see on the label or elsewhere. And I did not count my stitches, but we can do that now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Ooh, I'm going into my 12th one. So let me undo that one. I have 11 stitches and I have a whole lot of loop here. So what I'm going to do is take my tail, and I'm just going to pull it and pull it and pull it until that center is almost non-existent, but not too tight, so that I can get my 12th stitch in there. And I'm just going to yarn over, insert my hook in that center, yarn over, and do my double crochet. Now me, I don't like when my hats wiggle and wiggle and wiggle, because over time, of course, stuff does wear, but I don't like that. If it's cold outside, you don't want an air hole in your hat. So I just cinch it closed nice and tight using that brute strength that I sometimes display. And I kind of hold the string, the tail down with my middle finger of my hand that I am holding my yarn with. And I come to the top of that chain 3, which is right here. It might look a little short, but that is the top of it. I insert my hook and I do a slip stitch, which, if you don't know what a slip stitch is, I think I covered it in one of my previous tutorials, but if not, it's basically you yarning over, grabbing a yarn, pulling through, and pulling through, and that is a slip stitch. So while we're on the magic circle, a lot of times, again, hats are made in this, And I want to show you guys a way of weaving in your ends while you're working your hat, because if you're changing colors, you want to like knock some of that work out. So I'm doing this in double crochet, so I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and I am going to yarn over, and that the stitch right here where my chain 3 is coming out of, I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to go into that. Now if you notice, my tail is on top of my hook here, and what I'm going to do is just yarn over, pull up a loop, and work my double crochet as normal. Now what I just did here also is called an increase, which is, as the name suggests, increasing your number of stitches. So right now I have 12 stitches in this first kind of row. By the time I finish the second row, I'm going to have 24 stitches, because I'm going to put 2 stitches in each of my double crochets from the previous row. So I'm just gonna yarn over and go into these stitches and mindfully keep my count as I do that. And in doing so, again, you're just making this little circle bigger. And of course, if you're making a hat, you know you're going to have to increase and do what we call decreasing a lot, depending on the type of hat, which I think will be our next tutorial. I've been kind of trying to plan things out lately. I don't know what you guys would want to see made, so feel free to like retweet on Twitter or hit me up on Instagram, DM me, and I will definitely take your suggestions into consideration. I had put up an announcement on the Crochet Amino that I was doing tutorials and asked what I should cover, and somebody told me that, you know, gauge is super important and they wish they'd know more about it when they first started crocheting, and that they think it's something that should be discussed. And so here I am today actually mentioning it in my tutorial, so kudos to them. But I really do care about what you guys want to see, and I'm always excited by challenges that may have been met, because for the most part, like in detail, I never really thought about gauge. I knew that it was a thing that made either your yarn run out, or your yarn like be in surplus, or your project to be bigger or smaller than what it needed to be. I knew that much, and that's basically the extent. But I found this amazing article over on Craftsy that I did not write, but it's so in depth about gauge that I'm just gonna link it to you guys in the description box below at the end of the tutorial, because it's just amazing. It goes into details, and even some things that I thought, you know, I never actually thought about even 5 years in. It's actually in there, so I'll be linking that definitely. And I'm almost to the end of my second row, and gonna complete that like so. And I'm going to complete the row with a slip stitch by going into the top of that chain 3 from the beginning of the row and doing a slip stitch. Alright, and that is how you work in the round with a magic circle. You see we have this nice little flat piece. And so next I'm going to show you how to work in the round not using a magic circle. Alright, so now I'm back, and I'm going to show you another method of working in the round. This is another Red Heart Super Saver, and it is called Mexicana. I actually love this color when it works up. If you guys have been following me on Google Plus for a while, then you know I made my cats some cool New Year's clothes last year when I had them. And yeah, that was interesting. They did not keep them on in any way whatsoever. So the gauge for this yarn, yet again, is 12 single crochet per 4 inches. So another 5.5 millimeter project. Some Red Heart yarns are actually 5 millimeter, or yeah, 5 millimeter. So what I'm gonna do is start this thing off with a slip knot. And if you don't know how to do a slip knot, then I recommend going back to one of my previous tutorials or finding another one that works for you. And what I'm going to do is chain 6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what we're going to do here is insert our hook into that first chain right there. So just going to do that. And connect it with a slip stitch. Almost said slip knot, but that's not true. Alright, so a lot of times people will use this method for summer hats because that little hole is there. I have seen it with chunkier yarns being used for winter hats, but this isn't my favorite way. I actually learned this quite some time later after I started crocheting. So I'm also going to work this round in double crochet. So I have chained my 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook in the middle of this little circle we made earlier. And I'm going to yarn over, come up, and make my double crochet. And I am going to make 10 more because I count my chain as a stitch. So there's 3, 4. I love how this color changes, but I love most variegated yarns, so it's not saying much. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, and so the idea of this, I should be able to go atop of this chain 3 right here, insert my hook, and close it off with a slip stitch. And there I have a circle, or circular shape. So therefore I am working in the round. So obvious difference between the first guy and this guy, there's a huge gaping hole in the middle, which I don't prefer, but depending on the pattern and what you're making, it can be kind of useful. Some people, when they do sweaters, they make their sleeves from the bottom up, and so they have to do this. Even if you're doing like the sleeve down, I do believe when I made my Joseph sweater, actually I think I made mine from the top down, and I did it, yeah, in the round the whole time. So yeah, that's one of those things with sweater making. I might do one of those tutorials one day if anybody ever wants to see a sweater being made. It would definitely be a multi-part video, but it's something I'd be willing to do for you guys. So just, hit me up, let me know, talk to me. So I'm going to do a row of increase here. So just chaining 3 and yarning over, going into where that chain of 3 is coming from. And each stitch around, I'm just going to put 2 double crochets, making sure that I keep my count. So I'm at 4, and at 5, and at 6, and at, oh my god, yeah, so this is easy to do, even keeping count. you tend to skip stitches, and I have found that I do this and I get like into my decrease rows or something with my stitches, and I realize, oh, I don't have the right amount of stitches. This would be why. So count, but be conscious as well, because it's a lot of ripping back that I've done in my day. And you might be wondering why I joined the gauge speech in with the working in the round. The thing is with that is, like I've probably posted on the coffee blog, is sometimes I think subjects can be broken down just a little too much, and it makes it probably more confusing than what you're willing to deal with to learn a craft. And sometimes you just kind of need it to combine things also for time constraints. So I thought that it would be a good idea to kind of go over it a little bit, but again, I'll be linking a fully in-depth blog post on Gauge in the description below. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I'm on track. So it's 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Yes, success. 23 and 24. So I did that real fast just so we can do a row of decreases as promised. So I'm going to close this row off with a slip stitch. And I almost feel like I'm doing the hat tutorial already, but I promise I'm not. Not today. So I'm going to chain 3, 2, 3. Let's count to 3. No. Alright, so what a lot of people, some people call decreasing, if you're doing double crochets, maybe a double crochet together, you'll see DCTOG or something like that in a pattern, and I know that's intimidating because I can remember when I had to, well, when I was trying to follow a hat pattern written, and it was like THDCTOG, and I'm like, that is a foreign language. So what I'm going to do is put a decrease in every 11 stitches. So I do count my chain 3 as a stitch. So I've just made another stitch in another hole, and I'm going to count to 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I've done my 9 stitches. Now what I'm going to show you is the decreasing or the double crocheting together, 2 double crochets together. I prefer to just say decreasing. So I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into the next stitch. Yarn over, pull up that loop, yarn over, pull a loop through 2. But I'm not going to finish that double crochet, much like the last tutorial, make along. where I did not finish my half doubles, I'm doing that again. So I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Now I have 3 loops on my hook, and so I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through all 3, and that has effectively turned these 2 stitches right here into 1 stitch up here. So should you go around, you're going to have 1 less stitch at this point. So now we're going to go into the next 9. So I'm going to yarn over, do 1, 2, nope, I'm not going to increase, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and now I am going to yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, not finishing that double crochet but yarning over, inserting my hook into the next stitch, yarning over, pulling up a loop, yarning over, pulling through 2, not completing that one either, but I am going to yarn over and pull a loop through all 3. Now at this point I am down 2 stitches, so if I were to make another row, I would be missing 2 stitches at this point, because I have effectively again turned these 2 stitches down here into 1 stitch up here. And now what I'm going to do is yarn over, insert my hook, and in patterns, generally the amount of decreases, you'll finish off with the even stitches, so you wouldn't have these stitches at the end, but I do have 2 because decreasing after every 9 stitches was not good math for 24 stitches. But this is a sample on how to work in a round and not on how to work a hat, so it's kind of okay. And I'm just going to join here at the top of this chain 3. Wants to not be stubborn, with a slip stitch. Pardon. And I'm going to fasten off. And so that's it. That's how you work in a round. So with this round, we have a little decreasing. It almost looks like a mini hat. I don't know what you'll do with that. Swatch, you could continue on and try to make your hat on your own, or it can be a cozy for your air freshener or something like that. And also with this one, I did weave in the end, like the inside string, so to speak, at the top, so I can clip that and it'll be fine. And there we go. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I look forward to coming back with you guys again for next week's tutorial. I actually don't have anything specifically lined up, so if you are looking for something that you don't know how to do, please let me know, and I will plan and get on it. Otherwise, we're gonna get into the beginning